the first segment of the show, which is going to be a debate on who is closer to the GOAT. So this has been brought up recently because Patrick Mahomes won the Super Bowl, and right now the competition between him and Brady is very, very close, similar to how the debate between LeBron and Michael Jordan is also very close. So Brady, as we all know, Brady has 7 championships. Michael Jordan also has 6 championships, and with 6 Finals MVPs. Tom Brady has 5 Super Bowl MVPs, but that doesn't matter. But essentially, there's the main argument for both of these athletes is the ring category. And whenever people look at Michael Jordan, they look at they look at 6-0 in the NBA Finals, and they look at the fact that he's never lost in a very big game, in a championship game. He won the NCAA tournament. He won several Olympic gold medals, and there was never going in second place for him. And that's sort of the same argument for Tom Brady in the football aspect, and how both of these players have this sort of mentality that they are going to play every single second of the game like it's a game 7, or they're going to find a way to win the game in the end. So the main argument is the rings, and on the football side, it's longevity stats that Tom Brady was able to acquire. He leads all quarterbacks in passing yards, passing touchdowns, the completions. We can go on and on about that, but a lot of these are longevity stats, and for some reason they take into account those stats for Tom. But when they're talking about LeBron, the narrative sort of changes to where it's like, oh, well, he's played a bunch of games, so like he's supposed to get those numbers. He's supposed to be that good. Like, how does that work? Because that's just a really bad double standard, in my opinion, because here on one end you have one player that's being praised for all of these counting stats, but on the other end, in a completely different sport, he gets ridiculed for having these counting stats simply because like it took him this many games for him to reach those numbers and the total counting stats that he has. Like, for example, the total points. Right now, LeBron leads the NBA in most points scored by any player in NBA history. And a lot of his haters are saying, well, I mean, he's LeBron and he should be doing that because, I mean, like, he's been playing for 21 years. He's the oldest player in the league. These are things that, like, it's expected of him. Like, how does that make any sense? That makes absolutely zero sense to me. And of course, the other argument for Tom is that he has the rings, similar to how the argument for Michael Jordan is he has the rings as well. So for Michael Jordan, it's a little bit different because the rings can be taken into account because Michael Jordan was by far the best player on his team because he's won 6 Finals MVPs in a row. He's won 3 in a row straight, and then he took a little break from basketball, and then he won 3 in a row again. So the argument for MJ with rings is that he was the best player on those championship teams, and he has all of those rings. And I can understand that argument for Jordan because, like, yes, he was the best player on his team, but that's the same thing that could be said about LeBron because LeBron has also won Finals MVPs throughout all of his championship runs, and he's done it with multiple different teammates, not just with the same core that he had. Like, for example, Jordan was unable to make it out of the first round and make a deep playoff run without Scottie Pippen. LeBron has been able to win a championship without Wade. He's won a championship without Kyrie, and he's won a championship without Anthony Davis. And he's been the most valuable player in all of their championship runs up to this point. So that argument shouldn't be, like, that argument shouldn't even be a thing, because like LeBron has also been doing the same thing that Jordan's been doing. And there's not a lot of context that goes into how these players end up winning in either of the sports. Like, for example, in the on the football aspect, because we are talking about football, we don't hear anything about how good the defense was when Tom Brady was either on the Pats or on Tampa Bay. And for Jordan, we don't hear how good his team was on either of his championship runs. It makes it seem like they're the only players on that team, when especially in football, when football is a team sport. Like, I saw somewhere, I saw a stat where Tom Brady, he has a better record throwing 3 interceptions in the playoffs than Aaron Rodgers has throwing 3 touchdowns. Now, similar to that not being talked about, and how his defense was able to was able to carry him and to stay afloat in some of these games. That's the same respect that they treat Scottie Pippen, they treat Dennis Rodman, and they treat all the other players on that Bulls lineup, because the Bulls have had a great lineup every single time they've had a great trip in the playoffs or a decent finals run. They always had a great team, and that doesn't really get talked about as much as Michael Jordan gets talked about in those championships. And it's unfair, especially with how good some of these players were. Tony Kukoc, Dennis Rodman, Scottie Pippen, Horace Grant. And one thing about Horace Grant that they don't talk about is how in 1995, Michael Jordan lost a playoff series. And a lot of people don't like to count that playoff series because, Michael Jordan wasn't at 100% in that series. Well, according to the numbers, Michael Jordan averaged 31 points per game, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2.5 steals. Now, I don't know about you, that sounds like prime Michael Jordan to me. Like, those numbers are prime Michael Jordan. And the real reason why they didn't win was because they were actually weak at the power forward position. Now, this is something that The Last Dance doesn't tell you, because Michael Jordan obviously wasn't going to tell you. I mean, he did for a little bit, but he didn't really talk about it, and he made it seem like he wasn't at 100%, more so than it was the fault of not having a power forward. So, Horace Grant, from 91 to 93, he was the starting power forward for the Chicago Bulls. And he was essentially their third option. He was very, very competitive on the defensive end. He was also a very valuable scoring option, a great rebounder. And that resulted in the Bulls three-peating from 91 to 93. Michael Jordan takes a break, goes into baseball in 94. And then in the middle of the 94-95 season, he comes out of baseball, goes back to playing in the NBA. And while he wasn't necessarily his best for a while, he very much was prime Michael Jordan once he got to the postseason. And once he arrived there, in the same 94 to 95 season, Horace Grant had already signed with the Orlando Magic, which was the team that beat the Chicago Bulls in 6 games in the 1995 postseason. And because of that, because they were weak at the power forward position, and because the Bulls knew they were weak at the power forward position, Michael Jordan decided that they needed to be a power forward, and so the Bulls decided to bring along Dennis Rodman in free agency to play with Michael Jordan. So now they actually have a power forward to compete with that Orlando Magic team. So that is one thing that also doesn't get mentioned about Michael Jordan's career. The fact that the front office for the Chicago Bulls was really good in giving him the help that he needed with drafting and free agent signing and all of that kind of stuff. So the Miami Heat, they did do that. They did a very good job for those 4 years, but it's only 4 years. The Cleveland Cavaliers, on the other hand, they didn't do a good job until LeBron came back the second time where they drafted Kyrie and they were able to sign Kevin Love. And the Lakers, don't even get me started with the Lakers. The Lakers still, they failed to give LeBron the help, the real help that he needs. Anthony Davis, yes, that's great help, but you also need much more competent role players, which was something that the Bulls were able to get with Tony Kukoc, Paxton, Steve Kerr, all of those players. They were very important. And that's something that gets overlooked when you're talking about Jordan in his career, because we only talk about Jordan. And they barely talk about Scottie Pippen, who, by the way, in a lot of final series was leading the Bulls in every single stat aside from points. So take that with a grain of salt, if you will, or you can take that into serious account like I do. And what was I? I was talking about the Orlando Magic being one of the only teams that was able to beat the Bulls. And once they rematched in 1996 with Dennis Rodman, in the very first game that they played, Horace Grant got injured. And the Bulls were able to sweep the Orlando Magic in 1996, even with Penny and Shaq still healthy in the lineup. So, really, of course, there's no asterisk on that series. Nobody puts an asterisk on that series, despite Horace Grant getting injured. So, we weren't able to see that matchup of Dennis Rodman going against Horace Grant and what a healthy Orlando Magic team would do to that same Chicago Bulls team. So, Michael Jordan got a little bit lucky with that. And that's another thing that doesn't get taken into account when talking about the GOAT on either side of the sport. There is some immense luck that gets played into a lot of these games, especially with football, where it's only one game compared to where basketball, it's multiple games in a series. So I can give an example for football. We all know the infamous Super Bowl comeback that Tom Brady had. And just to let you guys know, in order to get there, he had to play an overtime game. He is 3-0 in overtime coin tosses. I know this is basketball, but I am pretty knowledgeable in football as well. And the defense was able to hold the best offense to 21 points as opposed to 31 points, which is what they averaged. So similar to that, those kinds of things get overlooked the same way that players that hit game-winning shots also get overlooked, or how the Chicago Bulls had only one less win compared to the previous season after losing Michael Jordan. So the team was still just as good, and they made it to the semi-conference finals against the New York Knicks, and they ended up losing that series in 7 games. So the Chicago Bulls were a very good team, and that's something that gets overlooked. Now with LeBron constantly has to be the best player on his team. He always has to be the leader of his team in every single statistical category that you could think of. He averaged a triple-double in the NBA Finals. He's led several mediocre teams to long playoff runs. He has the peak years. He went 8 straight years making it to the finals, which is something that gets overlooked ridiculously, because for some reason, I don't understand what it is, but a lot of these players and a lot of the media, they don't respect LeBron's 8-year streak of making it all the way to the finals, which doesn't make any sense, because the main reason why they don't give him credit for that is because he lost in a lot of those finals, but they also don't take into account the team that he had to beat in the finals. He's had to play against the Dynasty Spurs team, which is no joke. They had 3 Hall of Famers at least. And they had a Kawhi Leonard that was really dominant on the defense and was just making a name for himself on the offensive side of the ball when LeBron was on the Miami Heat. He also had to go up against what is arguably the best team to ever be assembled in the Golden State Warriors with Kevin Durant. That team came 1 game away from sweeping the entire league, and the only team that they lost to was LeBron. LeBron literally made that team run to the Hamptons and try to recruit KD to the lineup. That is absolutely insane to me. And the fact that LeBron had to go against that, like, no team was going to be able to beat that team whatsoever. So this debate on who is closer to the GOAT between Mahomes and Brady and LeBron and Jordan, me personally, I think that LeBron already passed Michael Jordan in the greatest player of all time. He is top 1 in total points in the NBA. He is top 5 in total assists in the NBA as well. He has the clutch gene. He has the peak years. He has every single thing that you could ever need in a basketball player on both sides of the floor. He can defend the 1 through the 5. He can play the 1 through the 5. He has everything that you would need in a player, similar to how Patrick Mahomes has everything that you would want in a quarterback. So for basketball, I personally think that LeBron has already passed Michael Jordan as the GOAT. And for football, I believe that Patrick Mahomes just needs time. Like LeBron James, he's already the GOAT. He's already the greatest basketball player to ever exist. And I don't think there's any other player that's going to be better than him at this rate, because he's still playing the best basketball he can possibly play. And if he can continue this for a year, or maybe even another year after that, like, I think everybody is going to acknowledge him as the greatest basketball player of all time. But with that, we are out of time with our first segment. So now we are going to go into the second segment, where I go ahead and talk about the Knicks filing a protest over their previous games. I will deep dive into that, but stay tuned after this short break.